My brother called me on a Thursday night the way he always does when he has news, which is to say, he didn't ask how I was doing first. Listen, he said, big meeting tomorrow. Like, serious. I've been working on this deal for 3 months, and it's finally happening. We're sitting down with the CEO of Meridian Group. That's great, Marcus, I said. I mean, it's not just great. This is the kind of thing that changes everything. Meridian's been expanding their regional portfolio, and if I can get in front of the right people, he paused. Not because he was done just for effect. I just wanted you to know. I asked him what time the meeting was. He said 11. I said I hoped it went well. There was a small silence. Then he said, "You know what Meridian is, right?" "I do," I said, just making sure. Another pause. The kind my brother uses when he wants you to understand that he knows something you don't. Their numbers are impressive. You'd have to see the growth projections to really get it. Sure, I said. We talked for a few more minutes. He talked mostly about the deal and his strategy and the prep work he'd done. And then we hung up. I sat with my phone for a moment after, looking at nothing in particular. Then I picked it up again and sent a text. To Patricia. It said, "My brother has a meeting with you tomorrow. He doesn't know we know each other. Please don't say anything beforehand. I'll explain later." She responded in about 40 seconds. 3 words. Oh, this is good. Patricia Nguyen is the CEO of Meridian Group. She is also, as of 3 years ago, my business partner, co-owner of a consulting subsidiary we built together that now operates under Meridian's umbrella. We met at a conference in Atlanta in 2019, stayed in touch, had coffee, then lunch, then a longer conversation over wine that turned into a partnership neither of us had planned but both of us had needed. She is sharp and direct and laughs at things that aren't quite jokes yet. Marcus does not know any of this. This is not because I hid it from him deliberately. It's more that Marcus and I exist in different categories of each other's lives. He talks to me about his work the way you'd update someone who doesn't really understand what you do, patient, simplified, a little proud of himself for explaining. He's never asked about mine in detail. He's asked how things are going, which is different. I've said fine, or good, or busy, and he's nodded and moved on, and we've talked about something else. That's how it's always been. Marcus is 44. 3 years older than me, and he's always occupied that space the way oldest siblings sometimes do, standing just slightly ahead, assuming the view from there is better. He's good at his work. He runs a mid-sized commercial real estate operation, and he knows his market, and he's built something real. I'm not taking that from him. But somewhere in his understanding of the world is a version of me that topped out around 32. A version that does fine, but not spectacular. A version that needs things explained. He has never asked what I do in any meaningful way. I've said fine or good or busy, and he's nodded, and we've moved on. The gap between what he thinks and what's true has grown so wide over the years that it would take a whole conversation to close it, and we've never quite gotten there. Until tomorrow, apparently. I got to the Meridian offices at 10:15. I didn't go in through the lobby. I have a badge. I've had one for 2 years. I went in through the side entrance the way I always do on Tuesdays when I'm there for the partner check-in. I went upstairs, stopped by Patricia's assistant to confirm the 11 o'clock, and then I sat in my usual chair in the small conference room adjacent to her office and went through my notes for the week. At 10:50, I heard Marcus in the lobby. I knew it was him before I saw him. I could hear his voice, that particular register he uses in professional settings, slightly louder than necessary, very deliberate. I heard him introduce himself to the receptionist. I heard him mention the meeting. I heard him say, "I've been looking forward to this," in the tone of a man who has rehearsed the moment. I stayed where I was. At 11 on the... Patricia's assistant brought Marcus to the main conference room. I waited 2 minutes. Then Patricia appeared in the doorway of the small room, looked at me, and raised one eyebrow. I gave her a small nod. She disappeared. I heard her greet Marcus. I heard the sound of chairs being pulled out, the particular acoustics of a high-ceilinged room settling into the start of a meeting. I gave it another minute. Then I picked up my folder and walked in. Marcus had his back to the door. He was saying something about market positioning. I caught the tail end of it. Patricia was across the table, listening with the expression she uses when she's being patient. When I walked in, she looked up and her face shifted into something warmer.
"There she is," she said.
Marcus turned. The look on his face went through 4 things in about 2 seconds. Recognition first. Oh, that's my sister. Then confusion. Why is she here? Then a kind of social recalibration. Maybe she works here. Maybe she's sitting in. Let me adjust. And then a 4th thing I don't quite have a word for, which was the expression of someone beginning to understand that they're missing information they should have had. "Hey," I said. "What are you?" He stopped. Restarted. "What are you doing here?" "I have a standing meeting on Tuesdays," I said. "Patricia and I usually go through the week's numbers before the afternoon calls." He looked at Patricia. Patricia looked back at him with an expression of complete professional neutrality. "Marcus," she said, "I should let you know, your sister is one of our partners here. She and I co-founded the consulting arm 3 years ago. Most of what we've built on the analysis side has come through her." Marcus opened his mouth and then closed it. I sat down at the table, not across from him the way an observer would, but at the head, which is where I sit when Patricia and I are running a joint meeting, because that's how we set it up. I opened my folder. I didn't make a show of it. I just sat down and opened my folder because that was what I was there to do. "I didn't know you were the meeting," Marcus said, finally. He was talking to me. "I'm not the whole meeting," I said. "You're here about the regional expansion proposal, right? That's actually something Patricia and I have been reviewing for the last 2 months. You're talking to both of us." He sat back in his chair, just slightly, the particular posture of a person recalibrating what room they're in. "You've been reviewing it," he said. "The analysis side, yes. The financial modeling, the feasibility work. That's what the consulting arm does." I looked at him steadily. "You have a solid proposal, Marcus. The Phase 2 projections are strong. We had some questions about the commercial lease structure on the Hendricks property. There's a risk exposure there that I flagged 2 weeks ago, but the core concept is good." He was looking at me like I was someone he'd just met, which, in a certain way, he had. "You flagged it," he said, "in writing. Patricia has the memo." Patricia slid a document across the table. Marcus looked at it. At the top, in the header, was the logo of our consulting firm. Below that was a 3-page analysis with my name at the bottom. He looked at my name for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he looked up. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. It was a reasonable question. I'd thought about how to answer it actually sitting in my apartment after his call the night before. I'd thought about the version where I explained it calmly, and the version where I pointed out that he'd never asked, and the version where I just let the moment be what it was without layering too much onto it. I went with something close to the truth. "You never really asked what I was working on," I said. "And I didn't think it was my job to make sure you knew." That landed. I saw it land. Not as a wound exactly, more as a thing that settles into the right place after a long time of being in the wrong one. Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at the memo again. Then at the table. "He's not a bad person, my brother. He's a person with a particular set of assumptions that had gone unchallenged for a long time, which is a different thing. You could see him working through it. The 3 months he'd spent on the proposal, the calls he'd made, the prep work, coming in confident with his strategy and his projections and his market knowledge, and sitting down at a table where his little sister had been reviewing his work for 2 weeks and had already sent notes. "The Hendricks lease thing," he said finally. "What's the exposure?" And just like that, we were in the meeting. That was the moment I appreciated most, honestly. Not the silence before it. The silence was just awkward. But that moment when Marcus put the awkward down and picked up the question. Because that's who he is underneath the assumptions. He's someone who, when confronted with information, actually wants to work with it. He just needed to be in a room where the information was impossible to miss. We spent an hour going through it. Patricia ran the conversation the way she always does, efficient, direct, leaving room for thinking. Marcus asked good questions. I answered the ones in my lane. Patricia answered the ones in hers. By the end, we had a preliminary framework and a follow-up scheduled for the following week. When Marcus and I walked out together, through the lobby this time, the main one, he was quiet for half a block. We hit the sidewalk and he squinted into the November light and said, 3 years. About that, I said. And you never said anything. You never asked, I said again. Not unkindly, just as a fact. He nodded slowly. We walked another half block. Then he said, the Hendricks thing, is it fixable? Yes, I said. That's why I flagged it instead of recommending against the deal. He nodded again. Okay. Another half block. I'm glad you were in there. It wasn't an apology exactly. Marcus doesn't really do apologies. He does acknowledgments, which are their own thing. But I understood what he meant. And I accepted it the way I accept most of his acknowledgments, which is quietly and without making it bigger than it needs to be. We got to the corner where we were going in different directions. Lunch sometime this week, he said. Thursday, I said. But you're buying. He looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled, not the performing smile, the real one, the one that's been the same since he was 12. Yeah, he said.
Yeah, okay.
Thursday. I watched him walk away toward the parking structure, hands in his coat pockets, and I stood on that corner for a moment before I turned and went back the way I'd come. Patricia texted me from her office window. I know this because it said, I watched you walk out. You are the most composed person I have ever met. I sent back a single word. Then I put my phone in my pocket and walked back to the office because I had a 2:30 call and the day wasn't close to done. Some people spend a lot of energy making sure others know what they've built. I understand the impulse. When you've worked hard and the work is real, there's something in you that wants it seen. But I've found over time that the better feeling isn't being seen. It's being known, quietly, fully, by the people who matter, and discovered, eventually, by the ones who should have been paying attention all along. I didn't need Marcus to be embarrassed. I just needed him to see me clearly. And sometimes, in my experience, the clearest view comes from sitting down in the same room and finally doing the work together. That's what Thursday is for.